It's not easy to go into space. Each one of these astronauts, General Charlie Bolden, 12th Administrator of NASA, four-time astronaut, and Marine Corps two-star general, he'll tell you, this is not easy work. They're working in space in a hostile environment. But like Jeanette Epps is up there in a hostile environment, risking her life for the betterment of all mankind. Not just here in the United States, but the entire world. You guys are our national heroes and our treasures. And we thank you for all of your contributions. And one more round of applause for our astronauts. Tonight we have Ms. Cheryl McNair in our audience tonight. Cheryl, could you stand up and be recognized? Cheryl is the wife of Dr. Ron McNair, who was on the Challenger in 1986. I thank you, Robert. At this point in time, we're going to move on to the next phase. We would like to recognize each one of our astronauts. Several of them could not be here, and I've heard from each and every one of them. Fred Gregory, well, better yet, let me tell you a little bit about the history real quick. We go back to Ed Dwight being selected in 1961 by John F. Kennedy to be the first African-American astronaut candidate. And unfortunately, due to the times and the racial issues in this country, after the Kennedy assassination, Ed was drummed out of the space program. Before he left the space program, President Johnson had stepped into the president after Kennedy's assassination. And one of the last things that they asked Ed to do before he left the program and was reassigned initially over to China Lake up in northern Southern California, and then over to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. They asked Ed to write a letter. And what should the next astronaut look like? And so Ed had to write about a 15-page letter that went directly to President Johnson. And he likes to tell the story. He says, in the last sentence I wrote, after writing this, because they wanted him to tell all of his experiences that he experienced out at Edwards Air Force Base while he was going through test pilot school and everything. He said, I wrote in all my experiences, and by the way, in the last sentence I wrote, he has to be a super N. And that was the last statement in that letter that he went out. That was in 1963. 4 years later, a gentleman came along by the name of Major Robert Lawrence. And Robert Lawrence was selected as an Air Force pilot. He became an Air Force test pilot. And he did laser work, one of the very first lasers. And General Bolden will tell you, if you have a chance to talk to him, that when he went up on his mission, he was one of the first individuals to fire a photon torpedo. You remember Star Trek? He fired a photon torpedo in space. So unfortunately, in 1967, Robert Lawrence passed away in a tragic accident out of Edwards Air Force Base. And so after that, the program for African Americans was on hold. About 1977, NASA contracted with Miss Nichelle Nichols. Most of you know her as Lieutenant Uhura on the Star Trek series in the early 60s. And they thought, because when Gene Roddenberry put together Star Trek, he went and contacted her, and NASA contacted her, because they put together what they called a multinational crew on board the enterprise that traveled through space, doing research and search. So after that, they contracted with Nichelle to go out and recruit the very first African-American astronauts. In 1978, the very first class was selected. That was Dr. Guyon Bluford. Unfortunately, Guyon couldn't make it because he's going through medical issues and had some treatment this week and could not make it, but he sends his regards. The next gentleman that came along was Dr. Ron McNair. He was the second to fly in space. And Ron was a famous martial artist, and he also was a saxophonist, and he played in space. The first time they ever took a saxophone in space, and he played it from space. The next gentleman was Colonel Fred Gregory. And Fred Gregory became the very first shuttle commander. And then the next individual after that was General Charlie Bolden, who we had an opportunity to meet when, in 1980-81 timeframe, for the first time at NASA headquarters. I was a young flight attendant for United Airlines at the time, and there was a group of pilots that wanted to see what the feasibility of airline pilots making the transition into flying the space shuttle. And NASA was gracious enough to come out, and Charlie and I had an opportunity to meet during that time, and we became friends, and we've been friends ever since. I've actually had Charlie, and you have to think about the 7-8 billion people in the world. I've had Charlie on 2 of my flights. In 1981-82 timeframe, we were flying from Tokyo, Japan to Los Angeles, and Charlie was traveling back to interview to become the commander of Miramar Naval Air Station out in Southern California. and then the next time was Charlie was the administrator of NASA, and I was traveling back and forth from Europe, and I was flying a trip from Paris to Washington, D.C. And what are the odds of this situation coming together? The chief person made an announcement and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Willie Daniels is the commander of the flight." And after he made the announcement who was flying the flight, he comes up and says, "Hey, there's a passenger back in the back. He says it's a very good friend of yours." And I say, "Really?" I say, "Who might that be?" Especially over here in Paris. And he came back, he said, "His name is Charlie Bolden." And I said, "Charlie Bolden?" I said, "You know who that is?" He said, "No." I said, "He's the administrator of NASA." So as it turns out, Charlie was sitting in seat 6C on this 777 aircraft that I was in command of, flying from Paris to Washington, D.C. And guess what? My crew rest seat was 6 Bravo in the cabin, right across the aisle from Charlie. And I'll tell this story because it's like getting an opportunity to sit next to the President of the United States for 2 hours and have a conversation. It doesn't happen normally like that. So I go back in the cabin on my break, and I sit down, and Charlie started talking, and Leland was the former associate administrator for education for NASA. And Charlie said, "Willie, before I leave NASA," that was in 2016, and then he was retiring under the Obama administration in January 2017. And Charlie said, "Willie, I want to do something for education." And when he said that, he says, "Can you facilitate a meeting with the folks at the Council of the Great City Schools?" Ray Hart, where are you? Ray Hart is in the back of the room. He's now the new executive director for the Council of the Great City Schools. But when Charlie said that, if you knew anything about the Council of the Great City Schools, they're located about 13, 14 blocks away from the White House in one direction, and NASA headquarters is 5 blocks in the other direction. And so I sat there, and I'm saying, Charlie asked me if he could facilitate this meeting. And so I'm in Colorado, and I called up Dr. Felton Williams, who was one of our other recipients, who was one of the past chairs of the Council of the Great City Schools. And we contacted the then executive director, Mr. Michael Casserly, and we came to a meeting over at NASA headquarters, and Charlie was there along with all of the educational people from his department at NASA. And so we talked for a while, and I was struck by the fact that Mr. Casserly, being the executive director of the Council of the Great City Schools, which is in 78 major urban areas at the time, and it had almost 7.8 million students. They had no idea the amount of educational material that NASA has created. And this was an opportunity for us to show the Council of the Great City School, who's all across this nation, the importance of what is being done in space for the future of our young generation. Now, with that being said, and Charlie, I'm going to move on because we have some presentations that we're going to make. But after Charlie, we had, I think it was Mae Jemison. And I just spoke here recently with Mae. She just came back in from Japan, and she's been traveling, and she sends her regards that she couldn't make it. And after Mae, then it was Dr. Bernard Harris. And Dr. Harris became the first individual, first African-American to walk in space. Bernard. Then after Bernard, we had not Leland, but we had, what's the one came after Bernard? Oh, Winston Scott. Winston Scott. And then the next one after Winston Scott is Mr. Robert Curbine. Winston was the second to walk in space, and Robert became the third African American to walk in space. And the list goes on and on. But I would be remiss if I missed one individual, Mr. Livingston Holder. Livingston, would you stand up? Livingston was scheduled to fly on the very next mission after the Challenger. Top secret DOD, so I can't talk about that because somebody might want to hurt me. But Livingston, unfortunately, his mission got canceled. However, that didn't stop Livingston. He is now designing his own spacecraft to do a horizontal takeoff and go up to space. That's pretty phenomenal. This is the type of knowledge and energy that we have in this room tonight. And so you have a list of all of the astronauts that I see their names on the screen there. You can Google them on Wikipedia, and you can learn all about these heroes, because I think they should be everyday household names, because this is our treasure. I'm of the mindset, we are honoring you, because if we don't honor you, who will? So that's why we're here, to honor you guys as our national treasure. With that being said, the rest of those you'll have an opportunity to receive. We're going to be doing a few presentations here. And the first one, we'd like to invite Mr. Ray Hart. Ray, could you come up for a moment? Ray is the executive director of the Council of the Great City Schools. They currently have over 8 million students now. In order to be a member of the council, they have to have at least 50,000 students in a school district. This gentleman, the Council of the Great City Schools, is made up of nothing but superintendents and school boards all across the nation. And this gentleman is in charge of that. So, Ray, we want to recognize the Council of the Great City Schools and have you say a couple of words.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I will be brief. I'm appreciative and I am floored. I didn't expect this. I sat in the back of the room because I wanted to be a participant and not here on stage, but I'm honored. I shared earlier in an interview that really sharing with our children, we represent the 78 largest urban school districts in the country, and really sharing with our children the opportunities that they have to participate in STEM activities, to become scientists, technologists, engineers, also explore space and aeronautics, and those opportunities that they have to build careers just as you have is something that's near and dear to my heart. So I look forward to being able to do that both with Shades of Blue and with all of you as we move forward. So thank you, sir.
If you want to stay for just a couple of minutes. Is Miss Emily Chamberlain from the Uvar Hazy Aerospace Museum, is she here tonight? Or one of the representatives of the museum? If she's here, I'd like to invite her. Without Emily and her team and the effort, what do you think about this backdrop? This is an unbelievable facility. Every astronaut in this room have flown on one of these vehicles, one of the space shuttles. How about a round of applause for that? It's over 10 million parts on this bird right here that took these folks into space, and they worked for weeks at a time, and they brought them back home safely, most of them. Emily, we want to say thank you for your work here at the museum and what you guys have done to make this all possible. We'd like to recognize you and the museum and say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being
You
here.
want to say a quick word? Okay.
Thank you all for being here.
Okay. Mr. Tennessee Garvey and Vanessa Jameson. Vanessa served on the board of Shades of Blue, and she actually went to be the chairman of the board for a while over at OBAP, the organization of, formerly known as the Organization of Black Airline Pilots, and then they evolved to the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals. And Vanessa now still serves on my board of directors here at Shades of Blue. And we're looking at having a partnership between Shades of Blue and OBAP. You know, to bring these things together, because this is the outreach, how we can reach the youth. Shades of Blue currently have about 18 young people, and I just got a call from a young man just about 3 or 4 days ago. I met him when he was in middle school. And he ended up at the Air Force Academy, and he just called me here recently and said, I'm waiting on a class date. I've been hired on with United Airlines. He will become the 19th young person at Shades of Blue to hire on. So Vanessa, and this is Mr. Tennessee Garvey, who is the president of OBAP. Yes. And is any representatives from Get Plated here? Any of the caterers? How was the food? So if the food was good, how about another round of applause for Get Plated? Because, you know, without them, you know, usually everybody goes to a gala or an event, and the food is not that good. But this is a young couple, young African-American couple here that got started here not too long ago. And this is...
We're representing them.
Okay, she is representing Get Plated. Come on up. And we're going to present this to you on behalf of Get Plated. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Okay?
Thank you. We'll pass it on.
Okay. And Robert, I'll turn it over to you. Yep. And is Miss Cynthia Gibson. Are you in the house? Okay, come on up, Cynthia. You know, I call Cynthia all times a day. I'm in Colorado. She's out on the West Coast. And Cynthia picks up the phone almost every time I turn around and say, hey, Cynthia, can you get this thing in the newspaper? Can you get it in Washington, D.C.? Every time I turn around, she says, Willie, I got an interview in Washington, D.C. I got TV interviews in Colorado and L.A. So Cynthia came over from the Community Build organization working for Mr. Robert Salcedo, who is the president of Community Build in Los Angeles. And Community Build is an outreach organization that reaches out to our youth all across the Los Angeles area, and Robert can tell you a little bit more about that organization. But we wanted to recognize Cynthia for all of her hard work in making this possible. So Cynthia, this is for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I was standing back here with Lieutenant Colonel Williams, recently retired from the Air Force, Lieutenant Colonel, and now with OBAP. His other important title is his husband. And he made the comment, tonight we have observed bubbles of black excellence. Let's give that a round of applause. I'll tell you why this is important and important to me. Bob Barboza, who was with our team, unfortunately passed away last year, and he headed up a lot of the space programming that we did. And I remember our first meeting together was Captain Marshall, Willie Daniels, and several others in a room. And he said, you know, what concerns me is that if you look at the hidden figures and all of the contributions African Americans have made to space and space travel, we don't see us in the rooms anymore. And I sat up in my chair because I thought that for a moment, what are we missing as a nation when we are not in the room? Give yourselves a round of applause. Captain Daniels.
This one is to a good friend of mine, Mr. Leland Melvin. Leland became the very first NFL football player to become an astronaut.
That's true.
Leland. You're welcome.
They cut me. No lines, no leaves.
Mr. Robert Kirby. Robert, third African American to walk in space. That's pretty phenomenal. Robert, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
When Robert and I first chatted, it was right around the time of our first meeting back in 2015 when we first held the first astronaut reunion. And Robert was traveling all over the world. And Robert says, I want to be there, but he couldn't get back. So this is for Robert Kirby.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, brother.
Robert, by the way, also had 7 missions to the International Space Station.
7 spacewalks.
Oh, I'm sorry. Correction. 7 spacewalks. Dr. Bernard Harris Well, first African American to walk in space. That's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, but he outdid me.
But you paved the way.
And Mr. Livingston Holder.
Thank you.
A phenomenal genius. Now, can you imagine building your own spacecraft that's going to go and fly into space and compete with SpaceX? And hopefully he'll get one of those contracts with NASA and the rest of us.
Thank you.
Is Cheryl McNair. We would like to recognize Mr. Ronald McNair. By almost ever since I first met Cheryl, she's at every event, you know, supporting her husband, Ronald McNair, over the years. And we've known each other for about the last 20 plus years or more. Cheryl. Okay, thank you. Thank you. And we saved the last one for the time being for the astronauts that are in the house. Did I miss any astronauts are in the house? I can't give Jeanette hers because she was moving by too fast. She was going about 17,500 miles an hour as she went by us. So we were fortunate to have her for as long as we did. That's pretty amazing. It used to be just a few minutes, but that was about 10 or 15 minutes of her talking to us. Now, none other than General Charles F. Bolden.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I'd like Charles to say a couple of words. Come on, Charles. Just a few words.
Yeah. No, you all don't need to hear from me. You've heard some phenomenal things tonight said, by some phenomenal people. I'm just privileged to have been associated with Shades of Blue for as long as I have. Most people don't know Willie's story, and you need to know it. So if you haven't bought his book, buy his book, because it is a tremendous story of overcoming trials and tribulations. And the big lesson from his story is, and you should tell your kids, don't let anybody tell you what you cannot do. Because Willie had people tell him what he could not do much of his young life. And this is just an indication of what can be done through determination. I'm honored to be here with my fellow astronauts and just with all of you tonight who support the program. But thanks very much for all that you do.
Thank you. Can we get a photo by any chance from someone who wants to take some pictures real quick while they're up on stage?
Great job, ladies and gentlemen. Great job. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, folks. I appreciate that.